Chelsea reads A Nihilist Princess, translated from the French of M. Louise Gagneur. Translator's Preface. The following translation was finished on the very day when I heard of the Tsar's assassination. In reading the book in the original, it struck me that the characters were drawn from real life, and now I am convinced that Sophie Piskovsky is the original of Wanda Krylov. What could be more characteristic of Wanda than Sophie's dying message to her mother? "Waste no time in assuaging the wrath of my father." The description of her beauty, of her refinement, of her cool, unflinching courage, of her wonderful self-possession, are all Wanda Krylov to the life. I noticed also the following extract from the daily papers. Sophie Piskovsky, the young lady hanged in St. Petersburg on Friday for her share in the assassination of the Tsar, was pretty and refined in appearance and was exceedingly well educated. She has a near relative, now an aide-de-camp to the Grand Duke Alexis. This aide-de-camp I take to be Varanin, called Alexis de Varanin, from his relations with the Grand Duke of that name. I think that Michael Fedorov is Hartmann, but of this I only conjecture, whereas Rusikov's resemblance to Korolev is most striking. His ignorance of the plans of his leaders, his reckless courage, his thoroughly undisciplined and excitable content, and his great dread of death perfectly tally with the gypsy character attributed to Korolev in the following pages. If we had more information concerning the personal history of the Tsar's assassins, many more salient points of resemblance might doubtless be discovered, but we must, at present, content ourselves with a wondering curiosity as to the identity of the actors in the following thrilling story. Author's Preface. For several years, the eyes of all of Europe have been fixed upon Russia. There is, in that autocratic empire, a state of political and social fermentation which interests the whole world. It was many years ago that the democratic seed was planted in the land of Caesarism and the Newt. In vain Nicholas tried to eradicate it in 1825. In vain the fortresses of Petropavlovsk closed upon the brave men who dared oppose the despot. In vain the snows of Siberia swallowed up thousands of thinking beings who had committed no crime save the crime of hoping for a better fate. In vain did the autocrat barricade his frontiers against the invasion of French ideas. In spite of all this, revolution, his nightmare, slowly and secretly crept upon him. After him, Alexander II, understanding perhaps the danger of his father's policy of repression, signed the ukase for the emancipation of the serfs. But this act of emancipation, which freed the peasants while it loaded them with rent and taxes, aggravated their misery and dissatisfied the nobles. The Zemstov and the Volost, that is, this local self-government, could not replace the national representation so ardently desired by the intelligent portion of the nation. A few other reforms, a few laws have been made, but who is to execute them? "God is so high, and the Tsar is so far," says the Russian peasant, accustomed to injustice. Corruption and bribery rule the Holy Empire. As Herzen says, "His Majesty's abuse is the real emperor." There must be radical change in the legislation and in the whole system of government. Perhaps Alexander desires this, but with his feeble will, what can he do? The democratic idea is necessary. It is rushing on. At the present time, when individual liberty and the right of self-government are daily growing more powerful, a government resting upon the bayonets is simply an anachronism, an anomaly. In a little while, this worm-eaten system, founded upon a pretend divine right, which in fact is mere brute force, will be transformed into entirely new ideas. There will be thorough freedom, political, religious, social freedom. Priests, kings, noblemen, manufacturers, all the representatives from the dead pasts, are vainly striving to retain in their grasp the power which is slowly slipping away from them. And the emperors and kings hurl against one another their vast armies, such as antiquity never saw, to keep up the semblance of their military power. But did the French war not end in a republic? Did the German war not end in a revolutionary party which is growing from day to day? And the war against Turkey, undertaken by the Tsar to strengthen his imperial power, has it not redoubled the ardor of the socialists? Now, what do these socialists, these nihilists as they call them, wish? They are truly nihilists, for they wish to annihilate everything as it presently exists. Now Russia, by its ancient institution, lends itself better than any other nation to this idea. And what are these institutions? The Russian Mir is a sort of cooperative agricultural association. The land is held in common and divided equally between all the members of the Mir. When the numbers of members increased or diminished, the land is divided over again. They are all equally responsible for the taxes, for the purchase of the machinery, for the cost of the government. The Mir is governed by a mayor and deputies who are elected. This organization meets with much opposition from the large proprietors, but the Russian peasant, unlike the French peasant who clings to his idea of exclusive possession, loves his Mir. It is of very ancient origin, and the Russian people have for years struggled to maintain it. At the time of the Mongol invasion, when an Asiatic monarchy was founded upon the soil of autonomous republics, a great number of peasants emigrated and, fleeing to the steppes into Siberia, established themselves in the depths of virgin forests and in inaccessible valleys. Thus they protested against Mongol despotism, and the free idea still lives in the hearts of the Cossacks. To the Russian socialist, this Mir, this agricultural community, holds a precious seed, a fruitful embryo, as it were, from which springs their dream, the Federation of Free Producers. Besides the Mir, Russia has its atels, these associations of workmen for their cultivation of some branch of industry. This product is divided equally between the workmen. It is upon this principle, dear to the Russian peasant, that the socialists are at present working. But the superstitious mujik does not desire to overthrow the Tsar. The revolutionists hope, though, that he will, in time, rebel against the nobility and the tax-gatherers. Up to this time, the Nihilist party has worked slowly, secretly, silently, in the midst of people, occasionally a mysterious assassination, daring proclamations, wonderful escapes from prison, superhuman sacrifices, such as only the very early days of Christianity have ever seen, strike awe into this old, skeptical, and selfish society. Who are these intrepid men and women who brave the Russian police and their terrible prisons? What mighty power induces them to give up their position in the world, these wealthy families, to embrace the hard, dangerous life of an apostle? They clothe themselves in the humble dress of an artisan. They learn a trade. They penetrate into the cottages of the poor. They surmount the fatigue of hard labor, so as to tell the peasant of his rights. Persons of the highest rank, princesses even, have thus consecrated themselves to the education of the masses. And this without ostentation, but with that cold ardor, that concentrated enthusiasm, which is one of the distinctive marks of Russian character. What doctrine do they teach? Do they promise their converts honors in this world and happiness in another? No. They are animated by no selfish hope. They are humanitarians, more thorough in their self-abnegation than the early Christians who believed in the recompense of heaven. They have no aim, save for the freedom of the nation. They desire to save the establishment of justice. Are there many of them? Today, writes Vera Zutelich, there is not a village in the Russian Empire where one cannot meet enlightened and conscientious socialists. The following pages will answer all of these questions. They contain an accurate picture of a movement which is destined to take a high place in the philosophical and social history of the 19th century. M. L. Gagneur.